Hello and welcome to Morning Brew on Labour Social. Technical difficulties. They're plagued by technical difficulties getting started, but we're here now, and that's what matters. Oh my God. It is Friday the 13th of October 2023. Third attempt, I believe, using all your YouTube notifications in one day on one stream is unfortunate, especially on a Friday when we have the agenda at 1 o'clock and also the Labour Social at 9 o'clock to look forward to. So please put them in your diaries because you're not going to get a notification. Not in this lifetime anyway. I'm just going to move my screen is not in the right place. So this is what happens when you go away for a few days to Liverpool and you come back. And the thing is, your desktop PC does have Wi-Fi capability, so you can set everything up fine. But you haven't brought your Ethernet cable home, and you need that for video streaming because you need the bandwidth, which you don't get with Wi-Fi. And I then had to just run around the house trying to find an Ethernet cable somewhere else and plug it in. No one cares. No one cares, Graham. All right. Anyway, it's your birthday. Oh, congratulations, David. Happy birthday, mate. Third time lucky. You're okay today. Seems like an interesting start. A little bit frustrating, shall we say? So when I plugged in the new Ethernet cable, it dropped the stream. I had it hanging on the front page, and it dropped the stream. And then when I went into YouTube Studio to try and fix it, it started a new stream that said with Phil Morehouse. We're getting away from what I wanted to talk about this morning. Right, first of all, obviously there are big events going on in Israel. And if we start talking about that, we're never going to end. And it's not what I want to focus on today. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not going to bring today's newspapers in, because obviously they are full of that. So I'm going to leave that for the moment because it's a truly upsetting situation. There's so many hot takes that I'm seeing on the internet at the moment. Some a little bit misinformed, some grossly misinformed, some are all right. But generally speaking, it's such a complex and such an emotive situation. I don't think that it's something that I feel like when people put stuff online about it, it's generally for the clicks rather than the actual wanting to help the people of Palestine or Israel. Anyway, right. So what I want to talk to you about today, once we get started, is about democracy. It's about democracy. Because I'm thinking about this, people go, "Oh, we live in a democracy." When you say that the Brexit vote was tainted, and I'm like, yeah, we live in a democracy, not the democracy, not even the best democracy. We just happen to live in a democracy that has slowly evolved over many, many, many years. And all that time, you've had people who wanted to make it more democratic, people who have pushed back against it for various reasons. And we're reaching a point now where I think it's very, very clear that our democracy isn't working. And that's fine. Look, there's other countries where democracy, you could argue, hasn't worked. Was it in the Netherlands? No, Belgium. Was it in Belgium? Yeah, it was. In Belgium, they didn't have a government for over a year once because they couldn't agree on stuff. In America, they have a president who is not just the head of the government, but also head of state, which I think is a bad idea. So you have this rally around the flag effect, or rally around the president effect that you saw after September the 11th in America, when you had a completely incompetent president in George W. Bush, who spent most of his time playing golf rather than running the country. Remind you of anyone? Trump. And he was thrust into this situation where suddenly he was getting like 90% approval ratings just by dint of being the emblematic head of the American people. But it doesn't end there. The US president is also technically the head of the military. That's the Navy, the Air Force, the Army of America. What? So you've got a civilian who has no military experience whatsoever making military decisions, deciding, being advised, obviously, by the military, but making decisions that the military are like, oh yeah, we'll do what you say, sir, even though you have no idea what you're talking about in this particular circumstance. And then you've got the FBI. He's head of the FBI. He's head of the CIA. He's head of the bloody Coast Guard, Homeland Security. It's too many caps for one person to wear. And it's why I'm a great believer in the separation of powers. Something that, just to slightly go back to Israel a little bit earlier this year, there were scenes, eruptions in the is it the Kismet or something? I don't know, the Israeli parliament, because they decided to take the Supreme Court's powers to say that, overturn laws because they are unconstitutional, which is the Supreme Court's job, basically taking a lot of their rights away. It was heralded as a wonderful win by the ultra-conservatives, and that's never a good thing. And so you've got other democracies around the world that aren't perfect. And I don't think our system's perfect either. And in a way, yeah, democracy is a reflection of us. It is a power of the people. It's this idea. It's a reflection of the fact that we're all a little bit, imperfect, shall we say? And so we end up with these imperfect systems. However, in the same way, if you're not feeling very healthy in yourself, you can go to the gym or go on a diet or get some exercise or whatever. We can do things to improve our democracy. And it's very frustrating. I mean, we talked about the glitter guy at the conference this week, which was incredibly frustrating because he only had like 5 followers on bloody TikTok? No, Twitter. He only had 5 followers on Twitter. And it was just, what did he want? Oh, I want better democracy. And I'm like, well, can we explain this a little bit more? Okay, so I thought I'd talk a little bit about what I would like to see for our democracy. And please come into the chat here and give me some of your ideas as well. First of all, the abolition of the House of Lords immediately. Get rid of it entirely. The fact that there are lords spiritual in the House of Lords. These are men, always men, who are, I think there's 12 or 15, unelected lawmakers for life by dint of being clergy. There's only one other country in the world where that happens. Iran. Literally Iran. Obviously, they're not Christian clergy, but Iran is the only country in the world that has people in the government just because they are men of the cloth. Okay. All right. We need to get rid of it. We need to get rid of this life peerages, the phony system where you can end up with someone who's only 29, 30 years old, like Charlotte Owen, who was given this privileged position of being an unelected lawmaker for life in this country. For life. She can sit in cabinet. You can't. But she can sit because she's part of the House of Lords. She can be brought into government to govern this country, unelected, for the next 70 years that she stays alive. If we don't change that, it's got to be changed immediately. That's one thing that Labour needs to just sweep away. The other thing is, obviously, a lot of us want PR, and I had a lot of interesting conversations this week, about PR, because obviously the Labour members are for it. 2/3 of the unions are for it. However, the Labour leadership are against it. Now, why might that be? Why? What causes that discrepancy there? Well, what it is I think that the leaders have convinced themselves that if they bring in PR, Labour, although it means that the Tories will never win another election, being the ultra right-wing lunatics that they are, unless they come back to the centre. But also they're worried that Labour will split into 3. Labour will split into, the tankies, the people on the very hard left, the people in the middle, I guess, and then the people in the Blairites, I guess. Are they on the right of the party? I don't know. I can't really tell. It's a bit difficult. It's a bit murky. I mean, the reality is, though, the party might split in 2 between the sort of Corbynite left and the rest of us, but I can't. That's it. And okay, say it does. So what? It means that maybe in a future election, Labour will have to make the choice between forming a coalition with the Corbynite left or forming a coalition with, say, the Lib Dems or even the SNP on a deal for them to get another vote or something like that, for independence. Which I'm going to come to in a moment as well, because I want to talk a little bit about the role of Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland in all this, because the system at the moment is so England heavy. It's ridiculous. And I just noticed Mike saying a second chamber is essential. Yes, I believe in a bicameral system. I'm going to come back to that. So yeah, PR. I think that despite the fact that there's a good chance that Labour will split into, I don't think it's going to split in 3, but it might split into 2. I don't necessarily see that as such a bad thing, because when you look at the stats, when you look at the polling, and when you look at the fact that Jeremy Corbyn never won an election, there's not that much support for it. You'd be surprised. There are a lot of people who voted Labour because they've always voted Labour, who weren't necessarily being pulled along by that sort of Lexiteer argument. And I'm sure there's a few people watching this who got quite wound up about it. I know I did. But yeah, but to circle back to the second chamber. So we get rid of the House of Lords. What do we replace it with? There was an idea that was put forward by Will Hutton many moons ago about having a House of Britain, which I quite like the idea of. And the way this would work is that you would have representatives of a more federal system to start with. So Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. And the idea is this. So there's a thing called the Football Board, I think, and they have 5 seats. They've got 5 seats. And in the Football Board, and they decide the rules of football around the world. And the 5 seats go to the English Football Association, the Welsh Football Association, the Northern Irish Football Association, the Scottish Football Association, and FIFA. FIFA gets 1 seat, but it's worth 4. Okay, so there's 8 technically, but you know. And if they want to change any of the rules, it means that FIFA can't impose a new rule like bringing in VAR or changing the rules of offside or whatever. They can't do that alone. They have to get at least 2 of the other FAs on board. And a system like that, I think, would work quite well in an upper chamber. So you have a system where you have more representation, not just of those areas, not just of Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, but also around the country. So the North gets more representation than it does at the moment. So it's a little bit weighted towards giving more representation to places that have been historically underrepresented. However, if there is a policy going through, you effectively need to get 3 out of the 4 parts of the United Kingdom, or maybe 2 of the 4 parts of the United Kingdom to go along with it, depending on what it is. And in order for it to pass. So imagine a bill comes up, and let's say 3 then. A bill comes along, Wales and England love it, Brexit, but Northern Ireland and Scotland hate it. It won't go ahead because it's not in the interest of Northern Ireland or Scotland for that to go ahead. Obviously, this means more incentives to go to Scotland and more incentives to go to more investment in Northern Ireland, more investment in Wales in order to get them on side for things. So it'll all work out in the wash. But if we're going to have a system in which our country is run from London, and it's a system of sort of 3.5 countries, if you like, or formed into one, I think we need to have better representation than we do now, and a lot more federal powers going to Wales, the Welsh Assembly, going to the Scottish Parliament, and going to the Northern Ireland Assembly, which still hasn't met for many years because the DUP refused to take their seats effectively. Anyway, the second house needs to be made up of industry professionals, not voted for MPs. People like doctors, farmers, military, etc., crucially voted in by the industry they represent between general elections. It's kind of a nice idea, but would anyone want to do that? I would rather encourage people who come from those professions to apply to become. I don't think it should be a barrier if someone doesn't come from that particular background. Because don't forget as well, I mean, one of the things that we have in Parliament, in the House of Commons, which you don't necessarily have for ministers, which we don't have in the House of Lords, is advisors, civil servants advisors who should be experts in certain fields advising. We're supposed to have a Secretary of State for Health who's advised by doctors and nurses from the NHS and moving policy forwards. The fact that the Tories probably don't listen to any of the advisors because they're sick of experts is another matter. Sounds a bit how the EU got rid of unanimity in at least some cases, says Joe. Sounds great having the countries on side. The Tories will hate it. The Tories will hate it, yeah. But the majority, let's say that there's 4 parts of the UK. You need 3 out of the 4 of them to say yes. That's the overall thing. But also, I mean, you would have more representation in that house for England. It's just that even though, say, there's 78 elected or appointed representatives, I'd rather than elected, for England, even them as a bloc can't outweigh the others. They can't outweigh Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland because they have their own needs. They have what they require. And the EU is a really good example of how this works because they had the EU-Canada trade deal and it was held up by the farmers of Walloon in Belgium. The farmers of Walloon said, this isn't a good deal for us. And so the EU changed the deal, made sure that what the farmers in Walloon wanted was good, and they went ahead with it. That was a minority group within the EU, a family of over 500 million citizens being held up by a handful. But that works because it means that everyone's views are taken on board. As many people as possible's views are taken on board. And I believe that if we had a situation like this, there's a good chance that oh, am I actually broadcasting? Sorry, I just realised that I can't connect. Am I streaming? Can anyone hear me? Can anyone say? Oh, you must be able to see me because you've commented on what I'm talking about, maybe. But yeah, okay. No, this looks better. Oh, this is bad. Okay, no, it's good. I just had one of those horrible feelings that I've just been talking for the last 20 minutes to no one. How about a random selection of people like jury service would be good and bad? Well, no, because if you did that, I mean, you'd end up with people who just couldn't be asked and just weren't invested in it. And yeah, I mean, with jury service, you have a selection, don't you? So you have people who go forward for jury service, but don't actually get selected for whatever reason. I can't hear or see you, says Michael Warner. I think that's a joke. Tim says, what is it with calling people's beds at home hospital beds? Sorry? I don't know. Sorry, I don't know what you're talking about, Tim. I've not heard that. Sorry. Is that something that the Tories are doing, saying, "Oh, we've got X many hospital beds"? So my dad is ill, as some of you know, with dementia, and he's bedbound most of the day, and he's in a hospital bed in our living room. It is a hospital bed, but it's not in a hospital. I don't know. I don't know, mate. I don't know. Tess says, one thing I can't bring myself to drop is the very effective scrutiny provided by the existing second chamber on £300 a day with no further people to nod to. The effective scrutiny, well, that's the point. I mean, House of Britain would do that. It's a second chamber. So you have the lower house creates the laws, puts it through for scrutiny, and then it goes back and forth a few times before getting the royal assent. So they say that this is rubbish and change a few things, and amendments can be made. I mean, that part of the upper house is great. And yeah, I would like to see that continue. What I don't want to see continue is Boris Johnson on his way out of office saying, yeah, my dad can be one of them and my love child can be one of them, allegedly. And they're they're unelected legislators for life. It just, yeah. It's painful. The crucial thing is to find a way of keeping political parties out of a second house. Not sure how. Don't want to repeat to the US. That's quite true, Di. And isn't it interesting in America, like for the last 40 years, probably since Reagan got elected in 1980, you've seen this very partisan American system where they will not vote together on anything. And it just means there's such a blockage in the American system. And I want to talk, again, if I want to look at a really good democratic system, the US isn't that. The US has a system where even if it somehow manages to get through, say, a Republican, you've got a bill, it manages to get through a Republican House of Representatives. Nice, okay? And then it gets through a Democratic Senate. Oh my God, okay? Unbelievable. So some people cross the aisle and vote with it. And then it gets to the president. The president's got two options. The president can just out and out veto it, or the president can pocket veto it, which is when they just put it in their pocket and say, well, we're not doing that. They can defy the will of the 538 people who are elected to make the law and say, oh, we're not doing that. I don't want to do that. We'll look at that later. Just puts it in a drawer. The congressional session runs out. The time runs out on the bill, and they have to make a new one. And to give one man that power is insane. It just is absolutely insane. And it's one of the good things in our system is we do have a head of state who is non-political. I would prefer it not to be a royal family because I'm not a monarchist in any way, shape, or form. But if we do have to have a head of state, which I think that we do, to go and represent the country around the world and open supermarkets and say, what do you do? Fine. But they shouldn't have any political power. And in the UK, we haven't seen a monarch actually veto a bill for over 200 years. I think it was Queen Anne. Was it the Scottish militia? 300 years. So the Scottish Militia Act, I'm going to say of 1707. Someone look that up. They say, no, actually, Graham, it was blah, blah, blah. But Graham, they aren't the same bill. They each pass their own version and then meet to agree in consolidated version to present to the president. Yeah, Christopher, my point is that even if it does get to that point, the president has it in his toolkit to just say no. Unilaterally. I just think it's a bad system. And countries around the world that have adopted the American model of democracy, which is a presidential democracy rather than a parliamentary democracy, the way you could describe it, have not necessarily done well out of it because it opens the door to strongman dictators. And I was having a conversation with Phil the other day about written constitution. He's not big on the written constitution because he thinks that in 200 years it's way out of date. And make it, I'm like, well, we'll make it part of the Constitution. That's the way I think. Make it part of the Constitution that you have to renew the Constitution every 27 years or whatever Thomas Jefferson suggested. That'd be great because then it could move with the times. And the fact that you have an American, again, another bad part of American democracy is they have a scrap of paper from the 1700s that is being used to run a democracy, one of the biggest democracies in the world in the 21st century, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't cover people's rights. It doesn't make people feel safe. In fact, it does the very opposite of that because it encourages people to go out and buy guns. Tim says, NHS virtual wards, Greg Hands, we delivered on our promise to roll out 10,000 hospital at home places by winter, a key target in our urgent and emergency care recovery plan. Well, I don't believe anything that the Tories say, so they'll probably milk those figures somehow. But I get what he's saying about them being hospital because it is a hospital bed. It's not just a bed. It's a specialist bed, so that people can spend all day in it because otherwise they would get bed sores and things and get ill. The US needs 67 senators to be veto. Alex, I think if it goes back to the House after the president says no, to overturn it takes. Is that what you're getting at? Also, to amend the Constitution is 67 senators as well of the 100 senators that we have. Southern Ireland has a good system. My brother did jury service once. They were essentially taught how to make crack cocaine. Okay, bit weird. Scottish Militia Bill 1708. Oh, there's only one out. Vetoed due to discovery of a Franco-Jacobite invasion fleet and fears any such militia would be disloyal. Thank you very much, Anglo-Norse. I love this. Fact-checking in real time. So it wasn't 1707, it was 1708. What a date to remember. James, or make the Constitution vague, guarantee socialised healthcare for all, public, well-funded education for all, etc. Fill in the gaps along the way, but achieve those goals. Well, yeah, I mean, what the Constitution exists for is if a government comes in and creates a stupid law, the Supreme Court or the High Court should be able to overturn it and say, no, that's not constitutional. At the moment, we don't have a written constitution. It's all convention. It's a bit more difficult to do that. Johnny Cophead, thank you very much for the first super chat of the morning. I don't really deserve super chats today because I was 8 minutes late getting started. The dander of a written constitution is that it almost becomes fetishized. Yes, you're right. It does. I think he means the danger. But I like danger. This thing that in America where they do worship the Constitution, especially the amendments, especially the Second Amendment. You can't change an amendment. Pretty sure you can. That's why it's called an amendment. But yeah, not necessarily the best system. And I think it's good that someone like Boris Johnson, who was a very charismatic, tyrannical leader who liked to just make money for himself and his friends and have a party every night. Please watch Partygate. But watch your blood pressure while you do. He got kicked out without an election. That was it. Thatcher kicked out without an election. See ya. We don't want you to be our leader anymore. Bye. I quite like that. Sorry, Tony Blair kicked out without an election. Tony Blair never lost an election. Boris Johnson never lost an election. Thatcher never lost an election. We got rid of them all. Technically speaking, Liz Truss never lost an election. Rishi Sunak's got it though. Master Templar, £5 super chat. Thank you very much. What's your opinion on Liz Kendall's speech at conference? Remarkably similar to that of the Tories and its worrying for disabled people. I'm really sorry, I didn't see Liz Kendall's speech at the party. I'm going to write that down, mate. And I will grab a pen. I'll watch it today, mate. So I've got some opinion on it. It is a big worry. The sort of demonization of disabled people by the Tories, saying that they should get back to work. They're just being lazy. It really does echo the rhetoric of the Nazis in the 1930s. It really does. Gary Lineker was not wrong when he said that. Especially disabled people, they have it so difficult, more difficult than a lot of us able people can imagine. Anyway, and then to say to them, we are going to dock the measly amount of money that you get. The measly amount of money that you get, we are going to dock it if you don't work. Is just beyond. It's beyond it's just beyond comprehension that anyone could be that cruel. It really is. It just shows how cynical the Tories are when it comes to minority groups that they know they can get away with demonising, and obviously the disabled, trans people. The amount of digs at trans people over the last couple of years from the Tories has been absolutely disgraceful, especially coming off the back of David Cameron boasting about how Britain was now the safest place in Europe for LGBT people. And there was a famous speech by Theresa May where she made it very clear that trans people deserve our love and respect, and they shouldn't be vilified and scapegoated for all the world's ills. And yet here we have the government making jokes, cracking jokes at the dispatch box about trans people. Isn't it funny? They think that they're women, but they're actually men. Fuck off. Like, it's painful. It's really painful that we're living in this society now where they can get away with doing this. And I'm hoping that with the new Labour administration coming in, hopefully next year, we will see a sea change in attitudes, not just from our politicians, but also reflected across the nation, because people pick up on stuff. The newspapers are repeating what these politicians are saying, and the people read the newspapers, they take it as read. They think it's real. They think, they can't see through the stuff. Graham, that was your second super chat. Oh, yes, it was. Sorry, yes. Master Templar, thank you very much for the super chat. I thought it said thank you very much for the super chat. That's why I read it. Amendments will have to be ratified by each state, which is why the Equal Rights Amendment hasn't passed. That's true, but I think that it's not every state. Look this up. I think it's like 37 of the 50 states. And if we could get like Wisconsin or someone to ratify it, the Equal Rights Amendments will come in, because there's a mechanism for it. Hasn't run out yet, even though I think they voted on it in like 1973. So like 50 years ago, they voted on this Equal Rights Amendment for the Constitution in America. And it went to ratification around the states, and it has to, I believe, have, is it 66% of the states behind it? And it's got like 64 or 65% of the states behind it, and it never crossed the threshold to become an amendment. But yeah, I'd quite like to see that. I'd also like Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico to become states. Not least so people who go, there's 52 states, because they get mixed up with playing cards, and go, no. Oh yeah, there is. And also they'll have to rewire the flag again. They'll have to rejig the stars on the flag to reflect. Just seen someone say they voted Labour all their life, but decided they won't at the G if Starmer is leader over Israel. Again, let's try not to bring the conversation back to Israel, but this is why when awful things happen around the world, it has an effect. We do not live in isolation. We do not live on an island. And international cooperation is what has been absolutely lacking in the Middle East for decades now. Absolute decades. There was a chance at peace in the 1990s, and we managed to screw it up. Netanyahu managed to screw it up when he was leader of the opposition in the 1990s. And it's just gone from bad to worse, as successive presidents of the United States have not been that arsed, or they've been too obsessed with Afghanistan, Iraq, other things going on to deal with this problem in the Middle East, which is that you have two groups of people who want to live on the same bit of land but can't share that land because religion. And as someone who is very, very anti-religious in my old age, well, I'm not as anti-religious as I used to be, but I am a militant atheist. It's nothing short of frustrating. I do have a friend from Palestine who is an atheist, and he just wants a one state. He's just like, can't we just live together? Just everyone live in the same state and have a system set up so you know people in charge are not going to be coming down on one side or the other. 50-50. You have to both agree. Both sides have to agree for that bill to go through. But unfortunately, that's a pipe dream at the moment. David Fonte, thank you very much for the super chat, mate. 38 Hong Kong dollars. Those who love peace must learn to organize as well as those who love war, says Martin Luther King. Yeah. And I will always come back to the fact that Gandhi managed to effectively get the British, I know it's a bit more complicated than this, but effectively, here's the headline: Gandhi got the British out of India without firing a single bullet. And led to the collapse of the British Empire without firing a bullet. There was a time as well, like I say, in the 90s, there was an opportunity because at the time, the Israelis were very dependent on the Palestinian workforce. The workforce had, mounted strikes, peaceful strikes, just sat down in the streets. There would have been more wiggle room for negotiation. But you have to understand that if someone feels like their relative has died or son, daughter, then they're not going to be in the right headspace for wanting peace talks, are they? Yeah. Someone was saying, my wife is deaf. We have this is Anglo-Norse, mate. My wife is deaf. My partner's deaf as well. We have all sorts of trouble getting her the PIP she was entitled to. They make it as difficult as possible. They make it as difficult as humanly possible. And they do the same with the dole. They make people, they shame people into not claiming it. More money goes unclaimed in benefits in this country than ends up going on fraud, benefit fraud. This idea that there's a woman living in Birmingham with 37 children and she lives in a palace. It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. And yet people believe it because it's easier. It's easier for them to look at the budgets of the country as in a household budget, which it's not, rather than looking at it like this is what we need to grow. They look at something like HS2 and go, how much does this cost? It doesn't cost anything because you make all that money back. Eventually, you'll make the money back if you have good infrastructure, you have good transport, you make the money back in investments and businesses and entrepreneurship and all that kind of stuff. You can only get that if you have physical mobility. If you set up your town or your city or your country in a way that discriminates against people of color or discriminates against people who are homosexual or lesbians or trans, or bi, you discriminate against people who are disabled, so you literally cannot get around, you cannot get on public transport, you cannot get into shops, then you are creating a system where that will not work under just basic rules of capitalism. You put up barriers to people buying stuff that they don't really need, and they won't buy those things that they don't really need. Which is why a poor society is not good for having a few ultra-rich people and a lot of people who are poor is not good for capitalism, which is the be all and end all. Apparently, we should let the market decide everything. Indeed, they're hoping for they're hoping their little Bible stories come true. Yeah, John. Well, this is what I said to the Jehovah's Witnesses when they came to visit me in Panama on the island. They came in a boat, and I had a couple of points for them. First of all, was, do you really think that we answered the most difficult questions ever posed to that humanity ever posed to itself correctly? Why are we here? How did it all begin? What happens after you die? That we answered them correctly in the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age. I'll say this again. The freaking Bronze Age. Do you know what I mean? Like, think about how much we know now with our space flights and large hadron space flights and large hadron colliders and massive telescopes, James Webb Telescope, Hubble Telescope, stuff we know about biology, germ theory, evolution. And yet, the correct answer to those questions wasn't discovered by looking for a radio telescope to the minute, 1 second after the Big Bang. No. It was discovered by people in the desert in the Bronze Age. And the answer was, hold back with me here, a magic wizard did it. Okay, right. A magic wizard, yeah, it lives in the sky. A magic wizard that lives in the sky did it. Okay. And the other question I asked is, do you want it to be true? Do you really want it to be true? Because do you want to, after you die, do you want to be asked questions about your life? Do you want to be, have the Inquisition? Nobody expects the afterlife Inquisition. So I want to know. I have written down here all the times you masturbated in your life and what you thought about while masturbating. Oh, yes. Okay. Well, this is going to take a while. So make yourself comfortable. And then, if you are deemed worthy of going to heaven, what do you do for the second trillion years? I mean, I'm sure you'll find lots of things to do in the first trillion years. It's not like people on this planet get bored within the first 40, 50 years of their life and decide to just, I don't know, spend time tending to the garden until they die. No. I'm sure you'll find loads of exciting and amazing, adventurous things to do for the first trillion years. My question is, what do you do for the second trillion years of your eternal existence? Because one of the things that humans are very difficult with is big numbers, and eternity is a bloody big number. Anyway, I don't know how I got onto that subject, but obviously, a little bit to do with what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. I asked them, where is God? They pointed to the sky, so I asked them, why do you worship in a building then? Because you can see through everything. At the beginning, God created the universe. That was widely regarded as a bad move and got a lot of people very angry. That's from Eurosh and also from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Great line there, great line. They say time passes differently in the afterlife. Well, I mean, look, the best afterlife sort of scenario is actually the TV show, The Good Place. I can't recommend it enough. It's really, really good. It deals with all this kind of philosophy over what happens when you die. There you go. These people will only be happy when every trans person has a visible tattoo. That's some Dice Stanton. Thank you very much for the super chat, mate. Yeah, I think you're right, Di. And I also feel like they want trans people just to not exist. They want them to not exist. It's all about erasure. Why do you think that TERFs get so upset and angry? And I think the F at the end of TERF stands for fascist, not feminist. They get so vexed about when NHS literature says people who give birth or people who menstruate. And they're like, oh, men can't menstruate. Yes, men can't menstruate, but some trans women can. And the erasure of the existence from the plane of everything of trans men is just disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful. It's like, oh, no, they don't exist. Yes, they freaking do. I think there are actually more trans men out there than there are trans women. So what? I find the whole thing so infuriating and upsetting, and I can only think of how upsetting only imagine how upsetting this all is, and scary for people who are trans, friends of mine who are trans, having to live through this period of just absolute trans panic, bullshit, culture war, demonization of trans people. They deserve our love and respect. That's what Theresa May said, our love and respect. And instead, we've got this Graham Linehan creep and J.K. Rowling going off on one at every opportunity to say trans people are bad, inherently bad. J.K. Rowling, someone said, put in the chat the other day, well, what's J.K. Rowling said that's homophobic? She's transphobic. She said a lot of transphobic stuff. The main one being, we have to stop automatically assuming innocence of certain groups. Now, if she was talking about black people there, I think you'd be a bit worried. Would you be a bit? I would be a bit worried. Yeah, well, she said it about trans people. So, it should be equally as worrisome. The idea that a certain group of society shouldn't be allowed to use the same bathrooms as the rest of us sounds like apartheid to me. Sounds a lot like what they had in America and in South Africa. You can't use this toilet. Why? Because you might attack me. Why? Because you're black. Oh, okay. So you have to use the different toilet. Yeah, but it's separate but equal. Separate but... No, not having it. Not having it. Sarah, thanks. Thanks, Sarah, saying thank you. No worries, Sarah. I'm just, like I say, I get that there are some issues that are going on right now that upset me to my core, and trans issues are one of them. The fact that we have gone backwards, so backwards. We were doing so well. Society was becoming so much more accepting of people who weren't gender conforming who weren't heterosexual conforming, whatever you want to call it. People who are different, but so what? Doesn't hurt anyone, does it? I mean, who's being inflicted by this? This NHS leaflet says people rather than women. So what? Just Rachel Jones, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. There was a transphobe attacking Labour on Question Time last night. Tory Fiona actually shut her down. Well, that's good. Di says, one of my closest friends is a fully transitioned woman. She's army trained to capable of defending herself, but she's terrified and desperate to emigrate. Mate, yeah. FT says, I don't know why anti-trans people get so worked up about the smallest percentage of a society. They're blowing things out of all proportion. It's because they used to be homophobes, and they used to want to go into your bedroom with a clipboard and a pen and watch you have sex and go, you're doing it wrong. I want you put in jail for the way that you just had consensual intercourse with that other person. And that's what they did. These are the exact same people that drove Alan Turing to kill himself, because he was arrested for being gay and he was forced to take estrogen. Because at the time they thought, well, if he takes some estrogen, that'll lower his sex drive or something. I don't know. And he ended up killing himself. And this was someone who won the war for us. You know, we idolise Winston Churchill, who had a lot of skeletons in his closet. Oh my God. But when it comes to actually shortening the war by 2 years, actually, if it wasn't for Alan Turing, I'll go this far, Germany would have been nuked. Because America had the nuclear bomb. They dropped 2 of them on Japan. If Germany was still in the war, one of those bombs would have been dropped on Berlin. You know, there wouldn't be a Berlin, this historic Berlin. It would have just been vaporized. Because the fact that he managed to break the Enigma cipher, the Enigma code, and essentially we knew what the Germans were saying to each other, and also the Lorenz cipher, I think there was another one as well that he managed to break, and that the experts say he shortened the war by 2 years and saved millions of lives. And we forced him to kill himself because he fancied men. And this, I don't see any difference in what people are behaving like now towards trans people. And all I see it is as essentially they want to be homophobic. They know that's no longer socially acceptable, so they move on to the next thing. Okay, we'll make being trans a thing that we'll go after. And it's absolutely disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful. And don't forget, look, me and my friends who are members of the Labour Party, we're going to stay members of the Labour Party after the next general election, and we are going to do our damnedest to make sure that we hassle. We this is why Labour Social exists, for Christ's sake. We hassle our elected representatives in the Labour Party to make it so that trans people feel safe in this country. So that we feel like we're being, people feel like they're being represented in this country. Tittle tattle merchants are only interested in other people's businesses. Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, why do you care? Why? But the fact that they are actively trying to stop gender affirming treatment for teenagers now is just disgusting. And it's like, okay, then, so are you going to stop children having surgery when they're born, when their gender isn't particularly defined? This happens all the time. But because it's a binary system that you put male or female on the birth certificate, and everyone wants to know, and they have gender reveal parties, but there's a good chance that if it's 1 in 100, it's not particularly obvious whether the child is male or female when born. Which is an interesting little fact that I found out 21 years ago talking to a pediatric surgeon who told me that. I was like, bloody hell, really? He said, yeah. Because it has to be binary, because you can't just put X on the birth certificate. And I still don't think you can do that. I think you should be able to do that. Male, female, X. And we'll work that one out later. I hope it's part of Labour needs to get. I hope a part of it is Labour needs to get into power before they can fix the issues. Well, that's it. Power or protest. We need power, and then we can really make things change. Clive says Germany had already surrendered by the time the bombs were ready. I know. That's what I mean. If it hadn't been for Turing, the war would still be going on in 1945, in the summer of 1945, when they capitulated, in April or something. And that's when America had those 2 bombs. And like I say, I think they would have dropped one on Japan and the other one on Berlin. Mentally, I struggle with anything binary, says Christopher. Well, yeah, so do I, actually. I see a lot of things as a gradual slope. It's just one of those things. Anyway, look, I'm having a really lovely conversation, but I realise I've gone way over time. I know I started late, but it's 25 past now, so you've missed James O'Brien's opening monologue. I'm very sorry about that. You're going to get no more notifications today because I've wasted all my notifications. So just remember, we're going to be back at 1 o'clock. Me and Phil are going to be talking about our experience at the Labour Party conference this week at 1 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock tonight, we're going to be doing the Labour Social, which I am kind of dreading in a way because I know that the conversation will come round to Israel-Palestine and we're going to have to flash a few things out. And I think it's going to be quite a difficult conversation to have. I'd love you to join us and try and keep us on the straight and narrow because obviously it's very emotive right now. A lot of people all around the world are incredibly upset about what's happening right now. It is upsetting, and I would probably, if we're going to discuss this later, I would probably, rather than looking at what has happened, what Hamas have done and what the Israeli government have done, I think I might be more tempted to look at people's responses. So we will cover. Hopefully, we'll cover Labour's responses and Emily Thornberry's response and Keir Starmer's response tonight. So tune in for that. Or if you want to watch something a bit more happier, go and watch Idiocracy. Actually, don't. I thought that was a great comedy. Turns out it was most definitely a documentary. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Like I say, I'll be back at 1 o'clock with Phil. And thanks for the super chats. Really appreciate it. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye. Oh.